I am Rolando Carrasco, and I am going to talk about web API design. I am from Mexico, so I'm sorry if I don't speak your language. I'm going to try to do it the best I can in English. If you have any questions, just let me know. If you think I am not giving a clear explanation about what I'm talking about, just also let me know. So I think we are ready. Thank you again for coming. Again, I am Rolando Carrasco, and I think we are ready to go. Here are my details. If for some reason you want to contact me, you can do it by email, by Twitter. There is my LinkedIn URL. And just, drop me an email or send me a note if you think this session was useful for you. If you want to learn more about web API design, just let me know, okay? So this is the agenda for today. We are going to be talking about web API design, business API design, okay? This is what we are going to be talking about in the next 45 minutes. It is about the design phase for an API development. That's what the session is all about. We are going to talk about how to design properly an API. That's our main goal in this session, okay? I am going to try to mix a little bit about some type of philosophy about web API design, and then we are going to get to the code, a little bit about coding, how to validate if my API is well designed. So I'm going to try to mix it up a little bit with some definitions, and then we are going to move to the code, all right? So I'm going to go first to the context about the web API momentum. Then I'm going to give you some design principles and patterns for APIs, and then finally we're going to get to Oracle Apiary, which is a tool from Oracle to design APIs. And first, I'm going to go through some of my background, and then in the next slides, we're going to be ready to go, okay? So this is part of my work. I wrote this book in 2015, so it is 4 years now. This is a book about API management, but unfortunately, that book is not good anymore because this product by Oracle is gone. It does not exist anymore, okay? So this Oracle API Management 12c, the first 3 chapters are good because we are talking about an API strategy, but then unfortunately the product is not available anymore. It turned into the API Platform Cloud Services now. But if you want to get to some good guidelines about how to start an API strategy, the first 3 chapters are good, okay? Then 2016 and 2017, I was a technical reviewer for these 2 books. The first one, the red one, is about Oracle Integration Cloud Services, which is, with that name is not available anymore. Now it is Oracle Integration Cloud. And then I participated as a technical reviewer for implementing Oracle API Platform Cloud Services, which is kind of the new product, not this one anymore, but the Oracle API Platform, okay? So technology has been moving so fast that this book itself, it was written like from the first chapter to the last one with no reviews in the middle. We wrote the book from scratch, and from chapter 1 to chapter 12. There was no reviews in the middle. When you just deliver the book, and then Pact, which is which is the publisher, just review it, and then we just publish it. But the last 2 books, it is different because the way that technology is moving, because of the cloud, we needed to review chapter by chapter, and sometimes when we were delivering the final revision of a particular chapter, then there was a new release of that cloud, okay? So technology is moving so fast that it's actually changing the way we write technical or technology books, okay? So if you are interested on this API design or APIs itself, I think that is a very good book, the API platform from Oracle, okay? So this is part of my work. Again, I am from Mexico. I work in Mexico City. I have a company by the name S&P Solutions, which is in the slides. I also run the Oracle Users Group in Mexico, Oramex. So I'm really into the Oracle technology, but I also have some other hobbies. I run this store in Mexico. It is like a pop art type of store. I bring it to the table because I try to mix art with technology. So if for some reason you go to Mexico City and you want to visit the store, you're going to experiment a little bit about the technology that we have inside the store. So if once you get into the store and you have our application, you get a notification about, it's just a welcome message. But again, if you are coming back to the store, if you have bought something previously, we can identify you and suggest you some of the new things that we have in the store. I don't know if you are aware about these things, which are bear bricks. Anyone in the room? No? Really? No? Well, these are Japanese, I may say toys, but it is much more like if you want to have a design toy for your house, it's a very good thing for you. So the size of a bear brick is like this. So when you get into the store and you have our application, you can, with the camera of your mobile phone, you can talk with the bear brick. There is a chatbot behind, and you can have a conversation with the bear brick. So we try to mix pop art and technology within the store. And guess what? Everything it is through APIs, and that is the reason why of this session. Okay. So this is the last slide for my presentation. I am also part of the Oracle ACE program, which is the Acknowledged Community Expert program. I don't know if you are aware of it, but if you are constantly contributing with the community, with articles in your blog, or if you participate in this type of session as a speaker, if you contribute with your local user group, then this is a good group for you. I am also part of the Groundbreakers Ambassador program, which is kind of a new program. It has almost 2 years now. It is not as large as the Oracle ACE program. I think we are about maybe 50 Groundbreakers ambassadors around the world. I joined the program, I think it was in May 2017. So it is almost 2 years now that I joined this group. Okay, so that is my background. That is part of my work, those books, my store. And now we are ready to go with the session. So APIs, or the APIs are a cornerstone for digital transformation. So I arrived yesterday night here to Berlin. Again, I live in Mexico City. It was a stop in Amsterdam yesterday, and then I just came here to Berlin. And the entire trip, I didn't need to talk with someone, not because I am not a person who wants to speak with other person. No, it's just that because I don't know your language, and in Amsterdam, I also didn't kind of feel comfortable because I didn't know how to say some of the things. But the important thing, or what I would like to highlight, is that I came here without having to talk with someone. I took an Uber in Mexico City that took me to the airport. I made check-in to the airline using my web application or my mobile application. I use Uber here in the airport and just brought me here. I made the check-in to the hotel using also the mobile application. So I did the entire trip. It was like maybe 20 to 22 hours trip without having the need to talk with someone. And again, it is not that I am a shy person and I don't want to, or I don't like to talk with people. I am not highlighting that. What I am trying to highlight is that we are doing things, and APIs are changing the way we live in such a way that I can make a 22-hour trip without having the need to talk with someone, okay? So that is kind of the way that technology is changing the way we live. And one of the most important things within that technology are web APIs. So we are doing all this stuff because of the APIs, okay? So a mobile application, a web application, or any Internet of Things application, it is talking each other with APIs. And web APIs are the cornerstone of digital transformation. So I am able to do all this stuff because of the APIs, okay? So do you think we are living on a happy world, with an HAPI world? If I ask you this, what would be your answer? Do you think we are living on a happy world or no? I think we are. I think we definitely were living on this era about APIs. But I also feel that people, it is not that much looking into design principles for APIs. I think we are doing APIs, but we are not taking care about design. Again, I think we are doing APIs, but we are not taking care about design. Okay, and that is the reason why of this session. I do think that we are living in this happy world, because if you take a look to the programmableweb.com, they have these statistics about how many APIs have been published in January 2006. And at least last year in 2018, there were almost 30,000 open APIs published, okay? At least those that are registered in programmableweb.com, okay? In the beginning of 2006, there were a few APIs published, but at the end of 2018, or the beginning, sorry, of 2018, we have almost 30,000 open APIs published and registered and published by Programmable Web, okay? If you are not aware about programmableweb.com, you must take a look to that website so you can get the feeling about how many APIs you can use at the moment, okay? So my question for you will be, what was the first API that you used? If you remember, what was the first API that you used? Anyone in the room? No? Anyone? No? Well, in my case, it was the Google API. And I think most of you probably used as your first API the Google API. Why? Because I think by the end of the 2010s or something, or the beginning, sorry, of 2010, I think we were almost everyone was trying to publish something about a map, right? And we were using Google Maps for that regard. So we were using the Google API. Or for translation, for example, that is also a Google API. So most of the times, the first API that we used was from Google. But now it is not about which API am I using, it is about which API am I publishing. So if you have already published your API, what are your thoughts around it? How do you feel about it? And how do you feel now? Because probably your first published API was maybe, I don't know, maybe a year ago, 2 years ago. So how do you feel now? How that design has been progressing now? So that would be a good question as well. And I think APIs are here, there, and everywhere. Okay? So I think APIs are moving the way that we are doing business. I don't know if Virgin Mobile has presence here in Germany. Do you know Virgin Mobile? No? So do you know Virgin as a company? So Virgin has many companies, and I think it was like 6 years ago now, they tried to move into the mobile industry, okay? But they don't own all the technology or all the backends or all the stuff to be a telco company. So they started to run the company on top of a different telco company. And at least in Latin America, they are running their business on top of Telefónica and Movistar, okay? So Virgin is not itself a telco company, but now they offer telco products. How are they doing that? Because they are using Telefónica Movistar APIs. So they are able to offer a telco product, a telco offering, if that's the way to say it, on top of Telefónica's network. Okay, so the concept of that is mobile virtual network operator, that would be Virgin Mobile, and Telefónica will be mobile network virtual enabler, okay? So Telefónica is publishing APIs, and that is giving others the opportunity to create a new offering on top of that infrastructure, okay? And that is because the APIs, and then we have content providers, we have government publishing APIs, and probably that is making a much more open government than ever. So we have many industries going into this API, for example, fintechs. So it is moving very fast. But ultimately, what is an API? I am actually not going to give a new definition about what is an API. What I'm going to do is just to complement it. Okay? I will say that if you are publishing an API, then you need to design your API as a product. So therefore, an API is a product for your organization. Okay? So again, if you are doing API stuff and you are publishing to the outside, then that is a product from your organization, and you need to treat that as a product. Okay? So a web API is a product for your organization. Okay, so that has to be very well designed. But what will be the relationship with web services, microservices, functions, or REST services, or whatever? What would be the difference? So what are we talking about when we are saying about APIs? What is the difference? What is the difference between APIs and services, microservices, and so on? The thing is that we need to take care about the API as a product, and then we need to take care about the technical stuff. And there is where the technical definitions and the technical stuff can be confused for us and can get us to this error about saying that API is equals to a web service or equals to a service or a microservices and so on. So just as a slide, maybe we can look into those things and think that an API is equal to a web service or equal to a service and so on. But the reality is that they are not the same thing, and they are actually intended for different purposes. Okay, so maybe they look alike, but they are intended for different purposes. Maybe they share the protocol, maybe they share the interface, but ultimately they are intended for different things and different purposes. Again, an API is a product. An API is a product, and therefore you are looking to get revenue from your API. A service is something that you are using for reuse, and you are using services to reduce cost because you want to promote reuse for your services and therefore reuse them and therefore reduce the cost for your organizations. But an API is for creating revenue. That's the main purpose. If you are publishing an API, it's because you want to create a new way to make revenue for your company. That's the main goal. But if you are not if you are working for government, for example, maybe you are not looking to generate revenue. Maybe that's another story. But if you are working for a company who wants to create new products and new markets and so on, then the APIs are probably one of the main things that you need to take care about it. So an API is a product, again. Instead of a service that is looking for reducing cost, an API is looking to create new revenue, okay? And we have to design those to be durable for the longevity and not ephemeral, so that is why we need design principles. So now we are getting into this context about an API is a product. That's something that I already mentioned. That would be one of the ways to make a definition of an API. We already mentioned that APIs are a cornerstone for digital transformation. We already mentioned that APIs are creating new ways to create revenue for your organization. So that is why we need design principles. If we are going to offer a new product to the external world, we better have good design principles, okay? And that is why I began the presentation saying that probably we are looking to create APIs, but not looking into the design principles, okay? So if it is your product, you better design them properly, okay? Okay, a product needs to go through the time and not be ephemeral, be durable. If we take a look to products that were created many years ago or even centuries ago, and we are still using, for example, a chair, we are still using chairs, and those chairs are working for us. Obviously, they are different from the beginning. I mean, the person who created a chair probably didn't think that that product maybe lasted for centuries, but now we are still using them, and we better use them and try to keep them through the years and make them durable. Okay, good APIs are like love at first sight. Okay, if you take a look to an API and you really like that API, then you are going to use it, and you are not going to struggle to use it. You're going to understand it. At the first moment you take a look to it, you will understand what is that API all about. Okay, you are going to fall in love with that API because it is easy to use. Okay, if we don't get into that API as fast as in 5 minutes, or if we don't understand that API in less than 5 minutes, probably that API is not well designed. If we don't understand a product in less than 5 minutes, it's because the product is not well designed. Okay, so we need to be ready to use APIs. Okay. And we may take this as an example, okay? So the Campbell soup is a good example for this because everything that is included in this in the box of a Campbell soup it is very well described within the box, in the box itself. So all the ingredients, how to use it, how to prepare it, everything, it is there. So everyone in this room, I can bet, has no problems, has no issues to use a Campbell soup. I don't see anyone in this room calling the call center for Campbell's asking about how to use or how to prepare a Campbell soup. I can even bet that you didn't even read the instructions for Campbell soup in order to prepare it. And that has been for years. I mean, this is probably the first version of the first release of a Campbell soup. Now, because of the way that the world is moving and materials and ingredients and size and so on, it has changed the way that the product is presented, but the product itself may be the same. I don't know if we ate Campbell soup 40 years ago. I don't know if the flavor is the same, if we taste one that was created in this year, but probably the recipe keep the same. But the product probably it is the same. The only thing that has been changing is the presentation of the product. And again, it is a product that it is ready to use. So we better build ready to use APIs, okay? And try to make them durable through the time. What I don't want to do is to have these kind of instant creation APIs, like right-click for your Java classes and create an API. That is something that I don't want you to do. It is kind of go against to the Campbell soup definition because this is ready to use, and this is just to open and eat it. But I don't want to have that in my APIs. I don't want to right-click my code and create APIs on top of that, because we need to have an API-first approach, a contract-first approach, or a design-first approach. That's what we need. We first need to design the box and all the ingredients and whatever it is inside the box. But we don't want to create what it is inside the box and then create the product. That would be the other way around, and that is not a good practice, okay? So APIs are the cornerstone for digital transformation, and this will be the last slide for this context. I don't know if you have tried this electrodomestic, the Thermomix. Have you tried it? Yes? No? In Latin America, it's not that popular, but I think in Europe it is. I think actually it is a German product. I don't know, but I think it is. For those who don't know what is the Thermomix, it's an electrodomestic which is actually going to prepare food for you. So it's going to make your meal, okay? So you just put inside the ingredients, and this is going to prepare the meal for you. If it is a soup or whatever you want to prepare, ice cream or whatever, this is going to prepare it for you, okay? I think the first version of this Thermomix was incorporated with some cards, and those cards included the recipes of whatever you can create with the Thermomix. So it was a list of about 150 to 200 recipes within those cards. So if you buy more cards, and you can have more recipes to be made by the Thermomix. But guess what? From last year, this thing can get connected to the internet, okay? So how do you think this is going to receive the recipes? Through APIs. So everybody can create an API for the recipe and connect the Thermomix to that API. And the Thermomix can download the recipe and then just offer you an additional recipes to those that are included in the cards, okay? So just answer me this. Is this changing the way we live as we started this presentation? For people who probably has no time to cook, this is changing the way they live. For people who is not, or maybe is a single family, or he has kids and there is no one in the house who can create the meal, this is changing the way they live. And why? Because the Thermomix is using API. So the APIs are something serious, and that is why we need design principle. Okay, so we need a style guide. Okay, this is the main purpose of this session. We need a style guide for our API design process. Okay, we need a style guide. We need something to be based on and then follow the rest of our APIs. It all begins with one API. We all started with one API, but then we are creating more and more APIs. And by the time we create more APIs, we need to be more cautious on how is the uniformity of those APIs. Okay? We need to be consistent with throughout the creation of our APIs. So we need a style guide. Okay? We need a style guide to be followed, and that style guide needs to include this. We need to include context. What are our APIs all about? What are we building? What are the main purpose of our APIs? Okay, what are the fundamentals of our APIs? Which are the design principles and patterns that we would like to follow for our APIs? How can we manage those APIs? How are we creating those APIs? And that is why we need tools. And how we are operating them, and how are we maintaining those APIs. That is why we need a style guide, okay? We need someone who can write these principles or this style guide, and then we need developers, and then we need designers for APIs to follow this style guide. This is a sample style guide for GitLab. So GitLab just published their API style guide, and this is the way it looks. Okay, this is open. So you can get into Google and say GitLab style guide, and you can get to this website. And there is an entire content about how to follow the principles for GitLab for an API style guide. And this is for Google, but this one is kind of old. This is from 2017. I don't know if they are moving their content somewhere else, or if they just created that as API design guide, and it was so good that it hasn't progressed through the years, but this is also an example. Okay? This is also my take on 8 design principles for APIs. Okay? If you are trying to design APIs, this is a good list for design principles. The first one is discoverability. So how are the developers or how are the consumers going to discover your APIs? Where are you publishing those APIs? How are you publishing them? Are you tagging them? Are you documenting them properly? Adaptability. So who are the consumers? We don't know. We don't know who is the one who is going to consume my APIs. So I cannot create an API just for a specific purpose. I need to create APIs for multi-purpose and multi-consumers, so I need to be adaptable for those consumers. Abstractions. I don't want to publish anything else than my API. I don't want to reveal what is happening in the backend. I don't want to reveal that in the backend I have Oracle, I have SAP, I have Salesforce. I don't want to reveal anything about it. Okay? I may reveal some of the things because I want to be open, but I don't want to reveal more than enough of what I am able to reveal for the external world. Versioning, I need to version those APIs. Every time that you use your mobile phone and it is updating an application automatically, did you ask for the mobile phone to do it? No. That is why you configure it to download the latest version of that application automatically. But what is happening behind the scenes? This is actually connected to a new set of APIs that probably that application has already published. You don't recognize that, and you are not aware of that, but that is happening behind the scenes. Okay? If I don't upgrade the Uber application, can I still use the Uber application? Yes or no? Anyone? Well, the answer is yes, I can still use Uber if I don't upgrade it. But if I do upgrade it, then I can get new things from Uber. Then Uber is going to maybe give me 6 months to upgrade my application. And then after 6 months, I'm going to be pushed to upgrade my application. But if I don't upgrade it, I can still use it. Why? Because it is using version for those APIs. A standardized API contract. All my APIs should have a standardized way to publish that API. If that is a REST interface, if that is a SOAP interface, if that is the way I want to do it. Autonomy, longevity. I need to have my APIs to last as long as I would like to them to live. I mean, I want my APIs to live as much as they can. I don't want to publish an API today, and in the next months that API is not published anymore. No, I want my APIs to be published for years. Okay? And I need to have naming conventions. And also a good suggestion is I want to create APIs, but that they can forgive us if we don't use them properly. Because if I don't use them properly, I don't want my API to crash. I want to keep responding to my consumers. So I want them to be forgiveness to the people who doesn't know how to do it, how to use it. And the last thing is that we want to learn to design for developers and for non-developers. Okay, this is something also very useful. So let's start it. I am going to make a demo using Oracle Apiary in the last 15 minutes to apply a style guide for our APIs. And that is exactly what we are going to do now, okay? So this is Apiary. This is an Oracle product. It is not that new. It has around 3 years now. It was acquired by a company called Apiary, and now is part of the Oracle Cloud offering. So within Apiary, I can design and I can model APIs, okay? This is my API first approach. Here I will do it, okay? Apiary supports APIBlueprint and Swagger. So OpenAPI or Swagger are probably the most open API modeling languages, but also Apiary contributes with APIBlueprint and also supports that. So I am going to create a very basic API. So this will be Oracle code Berlin. I'm going to create an API. Okay, so Apiary creates by default this sample API, which is a polls API. So it includes a resource, questions, which is going to return a list of questions. So imagine that someone is asking us to create an application to make a poll. So I use Apiary to design the API that is going to use that application. So one of the resources is questions, and it is actually going to return this list of questions, okay? If I want to create a new question, then I can use the same resource, but with a post, I can create a new question, and I think that's it, okay? So this is Apiary, and if I want to change the documentation for this, I can do it. This is sample API for Oracle code, okay? So take a look how this is actually doing my documentation automatically, and I actually can test my API. I can do it from here, or I can copy and paste this resource, and without having to program anything, I can share this with the developers and they can test the API right away. So I can very fast share the APIs with developers without having to actually code the API and then share it with the developers. I can model the API and share it with the developers, receive feedback and so on. If something is wrong here, let's say that this is not good and I want to program in Java, I just save it, okay. So I am not programming anything, I am just doing design, okay? So that is why we are very into design principles, because the first step of developing an API should be the design phase. So with Apiary, I can create a mock pretty straightforward and share it with the developers without having to develop anything, okay? So now let's move into a style guide sample. Let's imagine that we are a group of programmers and we acquire a new customer, and this customer is asking us to create an API for a B2B platform or an e-commerce platform. So we are building an API for that regard. Imagine that someone is asking us to create the new API for Shopify. Shopify is an e-commerce platform. So now we are creating an API for Shopify. So we need to create payments because the customers are going to make payments through the platform. So I create a payment resource, and I can create a payment with this post, receiving this information. I can create an order because it is an e-commerce, so I will create an order as well. I can fulfill an order, so I can fulfill this order with this resource. And I can pack and ship the orders with this resource. And finally, I can send notifications using this resource as well. So imagine that someone is asking us to create this API. I just finished this API, and I feel comfortable with this. But someone is going to validate it because someone has already defined with the style guide, as I mentioned in the slide, someone has just defined that all the resources should be in plural. All resources should be version, okay? All the resources should be compliant with the HTTP verbs. So someone wants to validate that. So let's see how that can be done. So I am just copying the API blueprint. This is API blueprint. And I am going to switch to team, which is one of the functionalities of Apiary. And now that I switch to team, I am going to move into kind of a tool who is going to help me to apply a style guide to my API. So it's going to validate the structure, the name of the resources, the verbs, and so on. So I am going to show you how to do that. So here in Playground, I am going to paste my API here. Okay. I think I didn't paste it properly, so I didn't copy the API blueprint, so let me just get back to Apiary to copy it properly. So I'm going to paste it in this column. I am going to apply the rules right here in the middle, and these functions, I'm going to show you how to develop these functions, are going to apply the rules that are in the middle to this API blueprint. Okay, so that's kind of the flow that I'm going to show you. Okay, so let me copy. Okay, so I just copy my API blueprint. Here are my rules. And this is the result of applying those rules. So take a look to the validate resource plural, and any of the resources are in plural. So this is highlighting me that the resources are not well written. This is payment instead of payments, okay? How am I writing these rules and these functions? It is very straightforward. So the rules are this basic JSON file, who is describing me which are the rules that I want to apply to my API. For example, version number, validate resource is plural, validate the date time for the messages, okay? And the functions are very basic JavaScript functions that I can write. So I can actually create a set of functions who can apply to my API and then validate it. And I am not going to publish this API until the validation is done. So let me just copy these new functions into the functions definitions. Okay. And run the test. So if I create a new function, I just need to enable here in the rules. If you take a look, this is false. If it is not false, it is because it is activated. So this is the way that we can actually validate the style guide for my API. So I wrote my API on Apiary. I wrote my rules in this JSON file, and I can actually program my functions using JavaScript. Okay, so I can use this to validate the style guide for my API. Let's look for an additional API. So once it was validated, let's suppose that we received the feedback for the designers, and then we created a new version of my API. So now I have the version of the resource in the name of the resource itself. I have plural in my resources, so now I have categories, I have now payments, and so on. So now I just copy this and paste it here. Okay, and now it is done without any failures. So imagine if we can introduce this to a CI/CD strategy. So we are designing our APIs, and every time that we design an API, we pass through this validation. And in case there is something wrong, we cannot move forward. In case this is good, we can move forward with the development of the API. This can be done here in the web application, or we can use a CLI, a command line interface, for doing exactly the same thing. So that is exactly what I'm going to do. So I have a CLI here, okay? Let me Let me move to this folder. So let me okay. I just need to set an environment variable. So this is, I am going to do an apiary. So if we do an apiary fetch, it's apiary fetch. Okay. This needs an API name. And the API name is coming from here. So this is Marketplace API final version. So this is Marketplace final version. Okay, and now it's asking me the API key. So I'm going to do a set apiary API key. Okay. So now I am fetching the definition of the API and downloading it to my laptop so I can work with it through the CLI. I don't know why it is taking its time. Oh, what happened? Marketplace API. Okay, Marketplace API final version. Okay, so once I download it, I can apply the style guide into the API body in my computer instead of doing it through the apiary. Okay, through the apiary website. So that is what I'm going to do now. So I am going to do an apiary style guide minus add equals marketplace. Okay, minus functions. Okay, minus rules. Okay, so this should do the work. So now I am applying exactly the same style guide, which is included in this function definition text and the rules text file, into my Marketplace API. Okay, so this should be doing exactly the same thing. Okay, so now it is validating exactly the same thing that I was doing in the web console. So this is the main purpose of the session. So you can have an alternative to validate the style of your API. Okay, so we are validating the style of our APIs. What we need to do is to create a set of functions and a set of rules that we want to apply them, and then just run the validation. If the validation is okay, then we can proceed to the development of the API. If the style guide is telling us that something is not fulfilled, then we need to stop and then revalidate what we are typing. Okay. So that is pretty much what I have in my presentation. If you want to learn more about this style guide thing, this is the documentation from Apiary. Okay, so everything is pretty well documented in terms of how to use the CLI and how to use the web console. If you want to take a look to the CLI reference, this is the documentation as well. And this is a video of the same demonstration, but step by step with a little bit more of time. So I show you how to apply the style guide, but in a more with more time, so you can take a look in more detail the steps. Okay. So thank you for coming, and I hope you like the session about how to apply a style guide for APIs with Oracle Apiary. Thank you.